Season 5 is back to reality for the trio. Well, no, not the trio. For the four of them. Well, more so for Jerry and George. Because season 4, things are going well for them. They had this pilot going. They were getting ready to shoot it. It was a successful show. And then, of course, Dalrymple's obsession with Elaine causes him to quit, go to Greenpeace. Unfortunately, he drowns. And then someone who was not a fan of the Jerry show took over. And then the show just went away. So now it's like back to the drawing board for the most part for Jerry and George. More so for George, of course. By the end of this season, of course, though, George has the best episode he's had in the entire series, which that will be a classic when we get to that episode. But I think season 5, which, as a reminder, was the first season to air at the premiere slot for television on NBC, 9 o'clock on Thursday nights, replacing Cheers. I think they had a pretty good start to season 5 with the episode The Mango. Definitely one of my personal favorites for sure. I wouldn't say it's one of my top 5, but definitely up there I'd say like top 10, top 15 maybe. Like definitely one of my personal favorite episodes of Seinfeld. And it has a pretty good story that, again, you've seen especially in season 4, they start going with a little bit of like the wacky and like, really, stretching some things, testing some things. Like, they had an entire episode, the contest, that was kind of like, testy with, the theme of that episode. The outing also is one also that was, could be take a little as controversial. Then we have this episode, The Mango, which just simply came from an idea that a friend of Larry David had pitched. A friend of Larry David's had pitched to him that summer. So they stretched it further and decided to do a show talking about orgasms. So, that's the main story. Faking it or feeling like you're not producing well enough below the equator, as George said. That's another, little reference they said to hide up, some terminology they don't want to say on live TV, below the equator. But I think personally it's a good episode. I enjoy it. I think it's very good. It's very entertaining. And also, it gives us some interesting twists and turns. But, let's talk about it. Let's roll into it and talk about the Mango episode. So the episode starts off with Jerry and George at Monk's, and they're talking about George's new girlfriend, Karen. Saying how he really likes her, but there's one little problem, though. He hasn't felt he's done his best, in the bedroom with her, obviously. And he basically, he feels like a rookie. He feels like he's not really doing that good and really pleasing her with how well he's done that there. He mentions something about how he even, got the tap, which, is not a good sign, apparently. So then they start talking about what if she was faking, as Elaine walks in. And she's like, who's faking? And then it turns into, the whole about faking orgasm talk. And Elaine admits that she's faked before. She said it was on occasion. And then Jerry goes, how did they not know you were faking? And she goes, because I was good. And George made a little bit of a joke at how many drinks, and he can't tell what it is, and then they start laughing. Or no, I'm sorry, maybe Jerry made that joke. I'm sorry, I think Jerry made that joke. And then Elaine goes, well, you didn't know. And then Jerry's like shocked. He's like, you faked with me? He says, I faked. And he's like, that whole thing, the whole performance was an act? She's like, not bad. He's like, what about the panting, the breathing, the moaning, the screaming? And Elaine is like, fake, 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 fake. And then, of course, they asked, well, how often did you fake? And she goes, all the time. And Jerry's just like, all the time. And she's just like, Jerry, don't worry about it. It wasn't you. I just didn't have it back then. I was young and this and that, all this jazz. And which, and Jerry's just like, and of course, in the midst of all this, as the details gets more and more juicy, and obviously more and more negative on Jerry's side, George keeps calling for the waitress to forget, I need a piece of cake here, I need another drink here, he kept calling for things similar to whenever Um, Either whenever Jerry was telling George about the panty remark, or whenever back in the deal where George was going to be asking for details from whenever Jerry slept with Elaine back in the deal. Um, it was like one of those other moments where it's just like, okay, getting juicy here, like, come on, give me this, like, just to add on more, like, the humor. Which again, it was an idea that that the friend of Larry Davis had pitched him that summer. This idea of what if Elaine admits she never had a real orgasm with Jerry. So they go along with that episode. Later, of course, though, at Jerry's apartment, Jerry's sitting there with Kramer. He's venting about it, how Elaine faked them all. And then he's, like, not really in the mood to go see her because he feels very, violated. And, like, he felt like, he didn't, prove himself with her. So, like, Elaine even called, and Jerry seemed, like, bitter about it, but he still agreed to go out to dinner with her that night. And then Kramer was asking him to tell him how he faked a few times. And at the same time, Elaine's at her office, and then she asked one of her friends if she ever faked, and she was on occasionally, because sometimes, you're just tired, you just want to get some sleep. Kramer said the exact same thing while he's faked a few times. While he's doing that, though, Kramer has a peach, and he goes cut up. He says it's a bad peach. It's a terrible peach, and it's from Joe's fruit, where he used to buy their fruit all the time. Now, this actually came from an idea that Kenny Kramer told a story about how it came from the idea of Larry David getting banned at a fruit store for squeezing the fruit too much. They basically told me the more you touch it, then you get to purchase the fruit, but he wouldn't do it. Then he got banned from the store. Well, sure enough, Kramer goes and complains to Joe, which apparently there was an episode earlier in the series where Kramer had a bad piece of fruit, and they said that Joe will accept returned fruit. Well, now in this episode, it's not the case. Kramer goes to see Joe, complains about the peach, and he refuses to give him his money back, and he just complains about it, and then he gets banned from the store. George, meanwhile, of course, goes out on a date with Karen, and he kind of like is trying to feel more confident, knowing that Karen's okay with him not. Because George is still just thinking he's not really giving it his best, but then he's trying to see if how Karen feels about it, but Karen's making it seem like don't worry, it's fine, but it's basically, it feels like she's saying, well, it's fine, but it's not, it could be better, basically. And of course, it's just not sitting well with George. And of course, there's also the famous line where he asks her, does it feel like after eating the risotto? She goes, no, I feel full after eating the risotto. And he's just saying these weird things just to kind of just trying to make him get his confidence back up. But again, he's just not succeeding with it at all. So then, meanwhile, Jerry and Elaine go out to dinner, and Elaine's going on and on, but Jerry's kind of in this, like, I'm going to get this night over with, sort of thing. He really is not happy with Elaine. He's very, upset about the fact that she faked every time with him. Then they start getting into an argument, and, they're trying to, blow it off as it's all fine, and still things are cooling off for a second, until Jerry just blurts out, give me another shot. And he basically just won another shot with Elaine in bed, which probably would be the first time since the deal, of course. He wanted to prove that he can actually, do it, and not make Elaine, fake. But Elaine's like, absolutely not, it'll kill her friendship. He's like, come on, give me a half an hour. No. 15 minutes? No. And then, he's like, come on, Elaine! Like, crying like a little baby, like, Mommy, I want to play, basically. No, and Jerry's like, And I don't know, it got funny, because, it's supposed to be an argument, but it got funny because Jerry was definitely acting like a little kid, wanting his favorite toy. Meantime, as Jerry wanted another shot to fool around with Elaine to prove that, he can do it and know that she doesn't have to fake for him anymore. So they get into that argument. George goes back to Karen's. They do their thing, but then afterwards, George again was just feeling like he felt like he didn't do good. And then again, Karen saying no, don't worry about it. It's totally fine, George. and he's saying how it's all Jerry and Elaine's fault because they just talked up, they were just talking up like orgasms and such, and then Karen's like, it's fine, and she goes, well, is it better than the risotto, or how did it feel? She goes, it's not like the risotto. So again, George takes that as, oh man, he goes, I still can't do it, and then Jerry and Elaine get into a fight when Jerry drops off Elaine, and yeah, their friendship just looked like it was falling apart. In the next scene, George, of course, is at Jerry's apartment, and he's just beefing to him because it wasn't for, that orgasm talk. He feels like he wouldn't have been thrown off because now they're saying he's thinking too much about, trying to, be amazing and, like, feeling like, he's just not, on his A game. Jerry also gets a phone call from one of his old girlfriends. He's called, like, so many of his ex-girlfriends trying to see if they faked with him also. And he's calling Elaine, rubbing in her face, which Elaine just, like, hangs up when doesn't want to hear anything about it. Then, Kramer comes by and tells Jerry about how he got banned from Joe's, and said how he needs Jerry to go get him some fruit. And George says, why can't you just go to the supermarket? And Kramer just refuses to go to the supermarket to get fruit. So finally, Jerry accepts it and says he'll go do it. Well, he does. And basically Joe catches on, which, if Jerry wasn't acting so obvious, he was acting so nervous, like, and all these, like, fancy little details about the fruit that only, like, someone like Kramer would be able to point out. And if he wasn't acting so suspicious, like, saying everything out loud of what all he was getting, Joe caught on and realized that he was getting fruit for Kramer, and then Joe banned Jerry. So then George ends up going and buying all their fruit, and of course, he had to pay, he had to get ready to pay him back, but of course Jerry didn't have the cash on him, and Kramer only carried hundreds, so he didn't have the cash to pay him back at the time. But of course George says he's not going to keep doing that all the time because that guy was really Joe was very eyeballing him up. And then Kramer, though, starts eating a mango, while George is saying how he's got another date with Karen, and he's worried that he says I hope I nail it this time, but basically he has no confidence that he can because he's got impotence. So then Kramer then gets the mango. Now apparently there's a thing where the mango kind of boosts your energy for the activity or whatnot. So George eats the mango and is praising how good it is. Then all of a sudden he goes, "Oh my goodness, I think it moved." He goes, "I'm back, baby! I'm back!" And he runs out, so now he's excited. He feels he's going to be on his A game, and nail it with Karen. Elaine, meanwhile, shows up, and she has a box, and Kramer leaves, and Elaine basically is looking like that Jerry and Elaine are going to just, get each other's things back and just never see each other again, because they both just can't stand each other, because Jerry's now mad at her for faking, and basically Elaine won't give him another shot to prove that, he's good in bed, even though Wyatt doesn't really matter that much. They're not even a romantic couple anymore, and the last time they made a deal about basically being friends with benefits, it didn't work out for them at all, and they almost, basically ended there. So they're exchanging things, and this one it seemed like everything was over, just about done. Elaine says, "I'll see you around." She steps out, but then pauses, and then steps back in, slams the door shut, and says, "Okay, it's fine. I'll give you half an hour." And he's like, "What, really?" And she's like, "Come on." And he's like, "Look, Jared, we have to do it to save the friendship." And then, Elaine just rips off her jacket, and she's wearing like a tank top, and Jerry's like, "Well, if we must," as he untucks his clothes and walks into the bedroom. Meanwhile, George goes to Karen's, and apparently George nailed it, because Karen was really praising him, and she seemed like she was moaning, like, "Oh George." But George, of course, being full of himself, starts accusing Karen of faking. And Karen gets offended and tells George to leave. But then, of course, George loses his glasses, and you see through the blurriness, which, of course, I feel like is a little bit of a foreshadow of what's going to happen in the following episode, because the following episode is based off of George's glasses, an incident with George's glasses. Karen's telling him to get out. Meanwhile, back at Jerry's apartment, you see Jerry and Elaine in bed. The first time you've actually seen them on screen in bed together. Elaine's like reading a magazine, like it's no big deal, and Jerry's sitting there like whining, and he's kept saying something like, "It's all George's fault." All this talk about impotence, and he's talking about how basically how George made him think too much, and he felt like he didn't do a good job either. And then Elaine rolls over and she says, "You got any more of that mango in the freezer? I'm getting kind of hungry." And then Jerry realizes, should have taken some of the mango. And yeah, that's the episode. Strange one, but it's one I like it. Of course, the lines I feel full after the risotto, or it's not like the risotto, which we'll come back later because I think we do. I can't remember if it's this season or not, but there's an episode called The Massage. Let me double check. I think it's this season. Let me see here. Let me check. No, not there. No, not there. That's going to be a good disc. Oh, that's going to be a good one. It must be in season 6, because it's not too far away, but there's another episode coming up called The Massage, where George and Karen do get back together. That's the episode where George obsesses over the fact that Jerry's girlfriend, who's a masseuse, does not like George at all. Yeah, that'll be that's when Karen will return, actually. But yeah, that's the mango. Again, a good start to season 5. Again, there's definitely another several good seasons, good seasons ahead of us, but good episodes in season 5 to talk about, and I look forward to definitely. But a good start, of course, with the mango episode. The next episode is called The Glasses, which is kind of more of a George-focused episode, which has a very strange story as George goes without glasses as he loses at the health club, even though he thinks that someone stole them. He ended up just losing them. But that'll be next time in The Glasses. So guys, that's my thoughts on the mango episode 1 of season 5. What are your thoughts, guys, on the mango? Leave your thoughts down in the comment section below. Be sure as always to slap a like on the video and subscribe for more content on my channel. Follow me on Twitter as well at DemandAirBoy93. Till then, guys, I'm checking out. I'll catch y'all later. Have a great rest of your night, and peace out, everybody.